So I've got all the mixing stuff taken care of. Got a good balance. I've got my compression and my EQ cleanup, and man, I've got some parallel processing happening. Reverb, send effects. Getting to a pretty cool place here. So what I want to do is, since this is like a one-off performance that we're sort of looking at here, we're not looking at making an album, right? We're focusing on getting this one song that we've been assigned sounding its best, associating it with some video, and putting it up as some YouTube content. So I'm not really worried about, how this sounds in comparison to other songs that might be on an album, and maybe this placement. Is it the first track? Is it the single? Is it after the ballad? That kind of stuff. That might affect some of the mastering, the final stages of audio processing that you might put this through. So I can approach this in a little bit of a simpler sort of way. When I'm mastering, what I want to do is take my master track and apply a couple of basic audio processing stuff here, but this is when all of these different audio elements that we've now manipulated in their own specific individual ways are getting funneled to this one place, and we're going to put some polish on things. So what I want to do is I want to put some very little, light compression on to sort of glue all the pieces together, right, and sort of just even things out just a little bit. Then I want to do some additional final cleanup with some EQ. Usually you're just removing some of the mids, the muddiness, so this cluttered area where that is shared in the frequency spectrum by all sorts of different instruments. So we want to clean that up a little bit, and sometimes you want to give an extra little boost in the bass, or maybe just a tiny little boost in the high end to add some shimmer and shine to things. So I'm going to go ahead and put the standard compressor on here. And my threshold is going to be real high, actually, because I don't want this to do too much work. So if I know that I've got a pretty loud mix or whatever, I'm going to have my ratio set real low. Maybe it's 2 to 1 or something. And I want my attack speed to be relatively fast. I think that's going to be important. So let's take a listen to how this sounds. So we don't want to see gain reduction happening all the time. We want it to just every once in a while peak at -1, -2, a little bit of gain reduction happening, but not very frequently. But if I don't see it happening at all, that means I've got to turn my threshold down. Too much, probably. Really, I just want to find those peaks of maybe the drums and just level them out just a teeny bit. And I'm going to let this roll into the chorus so I can see if things change there. Alright, so I sort of peak. I'm sort of my highest amount of gain reduction is 3 around there. So I might back off a little bit. So I'm raising my threshold to do that, and I'm going to listen to the before and after.
I'm falling off a cliff, chasing you.
So this one is going to be real subtle. Sometimes it's going to be hard, until you train your ears to really be looking for these things. It's going to be tough to see it. But when you see the orange come up here and the gain reduction, then some of these things are happening, and they're happening in a relatively small sort of way. We have a very light ratio here, so nothing crazy is happening. I might bump this up just to 3 to 1, but just because I wasn't hearing too much happening. But then I'm going to go switch over to EQ, and I'm going to do sort of the standard trick that I've done before. I think it was Shift and Control to listen to the different frequency ranges. And this area here from 100 Hertz up to 1K, I mean, this is the muddy area. So let's listen. See how you get that blankety sort of sound like you're underwater? I don't want that so much. It's sort of like, it takes away the clarity. So I'm going to remove some of that.
Find yourself a friend, chained to the bottom. Take 'em if you got 'em, help you up so you can fall again. God knows I wanted to be wrong, take you back every time you come. After a while it seems denial isn't helping cure anyone. On and on, there's nothing to say that hasn't been said.
So there I'm just sort of shelving the very high end, just, you know, just the shimmery sounds of, you know, like the harmonics in the vocals and some of the cymbal sort of sounds. I'm just giving it a little boost, about 3 to 4 dB, just to pop it up there a little bit. And I'm going to call it good there. Final thing, you know, you could... Mastering is sort of like the Jedi of the audio world. So, you know, we could spend an entire class talking about what's the appropriate way to do, what's the signal path, why would you choose one thing over the other. But we're just doing, you know, we just want a quick little bit of processing on my master to slap those on there and make this sound great to put it on YouTube. So I've got a couple of things to, you know, compression again, sort of even things out and just glue all the individual pieces together. A little bit of more cleanup on EQ to pull out some of the mid-range stuff, muddiness, and then to add some shimmer on the high end. And then I'm going to add a maxim, which you would find under dynamics. Maxim. And, you know, you can just jump to a factory preset like a radio limiter, but I mean, basically the idea here is to put your ceiling just under 0 because you never want to be clipping, right? And then just to start listening and lowering your threshold, and it's just going to bump up the volume as you go, and you just want to make sure that you don't overdo it. So let's listen.
I'm falling off a cliff, chasing you.
So yeah, I probably should have warned you about that, but you hear what happens if you go too far. But we've got a place like this, and we listen to it before and after. That sounds a world different. Alright, cool. So I'm going with that. I might back off just a little bit because I know it's going to get louder in the threshold or in the chorus section. Now, if you wanted to take this, you know, if you're advanced and you would take this a step further, then what you might do is take a look at your edit window here and say, hey, well, you know what? I've got these effects on my master, but I want some extra things to happen during the chorus, right? I want the chorus to sound a little bit louder. So if you wanted to do something like that, what you would do is automate the threshold here on your maxim and just like crush it just a little bit further so that the chorus is even more saturated and more full. And the way you do that, you want to have individual control over a parameter. You go to this auto section here for automation, click on this window, and this is going to give me a list of all the different parameters on this particular plugin. So you could do this with any plugin. So I'm going to say threshold, and what this is going to allow me to do is you know how I've got these automation lines here for volume, so I can make keyframes and things like that if you're familiar with Premiere Pro. If I'm adding threshold on here, then watch, when I go to my master track here and I just select from volume view to something else, I've got threshold view for this particular plugin. So now I can make adjustments to this just during these particular sections. So here's my chorus section, and I want to take that section and I want to bump up, or lower actually, in this case, the threshold a little bit, and watch what happens. Watch here. So it lowers that threshold, which is effectively sort of reducing your dynamic range and sort of crushing that particular area. So it's just a little bit louder. It's a subtle thing, but it's a nice little trick. So I'm going to do that again, and just lower it just a little bit. think 7.4 is where I was at, 8.7. So I'm going to make it the same-ish. And actually, I think I might just make it this way for the rest of the tune. So 8.7. So we've got it backing off a little bit during, you know, those the verses and stuff, and then it sort of will just feel a little bit more full, and the perceived loudness will be increased during those times. So that's pretty awesome. One final video about how to export this stuff and just do a compare and contrast about how it sounded before and after all these changes, just to make sure before we submit that things actually are sounding better. Thanks for watching.